Dragon's Dogma has always been a game about power fantasy and how you earn it along the way. And one of the best power fantasies that Dragon's Dogma has to offer is the Warrior Vocation. While being considered the unofficial hard mode of Dragon's Dogma 1, Dragon's Dogma 2 appears to be giving Warrior its full glory with many different ways of attack and absolutely unfair damage. With the new combat system of Dragon's Dogma 2, Warrior also sees an upgrade from 3 available skills to now having 4, which is always a boost in anyone's department, and that's not even counting the vocation action it gains as well. So today we're going to be going over the core skills, the skills, and also the augments of the Warrior Vocation, and also little tidbits of information that I think you'll find useful in deciding if you'd like to take the Warrior Vocation for a spin. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, we'll start with the core skills. The first is the light attack, which is named Mighty Sweep, which will allow you to swing your blade in a horizontal arc. And as with many skills that we'll find in the Warrior Vocation, this light attack can be charged for increased damage. During the charging animation, you also gain a bit of knockdown resistance, and the act of charging makes you less likely to flinch as well. You'll see that as a common theme in the Warrior Vocation skills. The heavy attack for the Warrior is called Stone Splitter, which conversely performs a downward slash for a vertical strike. It's also noted that if you happen to knock an enemy off balance, it will then perform a powerful successive strike, which of course will deal increased damage. The vocation action of the Warrior is a barge skill, which will allow you to rush forward, tackling the target, or knocking it off balance. This vocation action can be used in the middle of charging another skill, which will allow you to then knock your opponent off balance and allow for more time for charging of said skill. It seems that this vocation action is more of a defensive maneuver to allow you to burst through individual enemy hits, which will allow you to find openings of your own. And to help out these options, we also have 3 additional core skills, being Chain of Blows, Bulwark, and Breakneck Strike. Chain of Blows allows you to use your momentum to unleash an additional Mighty Sweep. And what this means is that if you happen to charge your Mighty Sweep attacks correctly, you can get extra damage and extra knockback. This will also allow you to swing your Mighty Sweep even faster as well. Bulwark is a simple buff that allows you to take reduced damage from targets whenever you're charging an attack. And Breakneck Strike allows you to get extra damage off of said charged attack if you happen to release the attack the second it becomes charged. From just the core skills alone, we can see that Warrior has been buffed in many different ways in terms of both offense and defense, and there are many different sweet spots you can hit with different attacks to allow for increased damage or increased output of blows. And with that, we come to the Warrior Vocation skills, which are very powerful attacks indeed. To start, we have Skyward Sunder, which jumps up and slashes skyward simultaneously, which will allow you to get extra height off of this blow and will hit flying targets. As with many skills, this can be charged for increased effect. In gameplay of this footage and in trailer footage, we can see that this has the ability to not only deal massive amounts of damage, but also knock back enemies as well, such as this giant Cyclops. The next skill is called Goring Lunge, which allows you to charge forward and will actually run through targets with your blade and can even pin them to different terrain if you happen to maneuver this correctly. Not only does it provide a great source of damage, but if you need to move faster during a fight, you can use this skill to create distance or close it as well. Bellow is a shout which will draw aggro to yourself, which can be seen in this gameplay against a Drake. This is useful if you plan to divert the attention of targets that you're trying to tank down and can be used in a variety of situations. The Bellow skill also affects the grass around you in a very cool way, and for aesthetic purposes, I think that this definitely deserves a plus. Next is Rending Sweep, which is your basic spin to win skill. It allows you to spin the blade around you in order to cut down foes and also knock them back as well. This can also be charged prior to activation. Next is Savage Lash, which we can see in this gameplay against an ogre in a cave. It seems to be a very basic charge skill. The longer you hold it, the more damage it will do with no increased effects. So if you're looking for an easy damage dealer, this might be a skill for you. Next is Ladder Launch, which is similar to Springboard from Dragon's Dogma 1. This is borrowed from a fighter skill from Dragon's Dogma 1, where you could use your shield to allow your allies to gain much higher heights off of their jumps. This skill is useful for both yourself and your allies, as it allows you to get a height advantage on any large enemies so that you can hit those weak points points even better. And it seems that this skill will make an appearance not only for the fighter vocation, but for the warrior vocation as well in the form of ladder launch. Next we have Null Breaker, which is a chargeable skill, which allows you to thrust your blade upward, which will deal a solid blow and even stagger larger opponents. If done at the right time or with enough force, the warrior vocation can even render certain enemies unconscious after a blow like this. So I imagine that if you have a larger opponent such as an ogre or a cyclops to take down, you might want to take Null Breaker with you. The next skill we have is Revivify, which will give you a second wind, which will cure you of certain debilitations such as catching fire, frostbite, sleep, silence, or being unconscious. I can imagine that if the warrior in this gameplay had a skill like Revivify, they'd be using it very liberally after getting knocked around by this ogre. The next skill we have is called Gale Slash, which will use your blade's momentum to unleash a series of weighty slashes. This skill is very similar to the core skill Mighty Sweep, which is your light attack, in that you can reactivate it at the end of each strike to allow yourself to strike faster and with more force. After a certain amount of repeated strikes, the attack will then end in a powerful slash attack if you time it correctly. So again, if you like big bonks but at a faster rate, this skill might be the one for you as well. If you're the type of player that likes to go for countering certain abilities, then you'll like Tidal Fury, which will deliver a momentous counterattack if you happen to get struck at the moment of activation. If timed correctly, this will give a mighty counterattack that can even be used to knock down opponents. If you happen to miss the timing activation of the counterattack, it can also just be used as a great defense against any attacks that you happen to be guarding against. So overall, it seems that there's no downside to this skill as long as you know how to properly use it. And it rounds out the warrior's kit in a way that most of the other skills don't, in the sense that warrior doesn't really have a whole lot of defensive capabilities aside from its vocation action. So if you'd like to round it out in that way, you certainly can with this skill. And lastly, the skill that started off the warrior vocation trailer, we have Stonebreaker, which appears to deliver a downward slash followed by a stab, which will then send your opponents flying. So if you're into super strong big bonks, this apparently seems to be the skill for you. And also is great if you just like yeeting opponents across the battlefield. So that was a lot of skills that we went over for the warrior vocation. Hopefully all of them pique your interest for this specific ability set. Now let's go into the augments for the warrior vocation. We have Intrepidity, which reduces the accumulation of the loss gauge when receiving damage. This is of course referring to the white bar at your health. Whenever you take damage, the white bar goes down a peg, and it seems like Intrepidity will just be reducing the amount that this white bar maximum goes down. I can also see it being a useful skill if you're having a hard time in a boss fight or with several enemies and you want to have a bit more survivability to travel for longer periods of time. Next we have Pertinacity, which is actually a new augment to Dragon's Dogma 2, which improves your ability to break through an opponent's guard. So if an enemy is raising a shield or has hyper armor in an attack, it should improve your ability to break through both of those things. I could definitely see Sweeping Strike being a decent combo with Pertinacity, as you'll have multiple enemies around you and you can break through the guard of all of them apparently. Next is Dominance, which is a straight rip of the warrior vocation augment Impact, which increases your knockdown power. Pretty self-explanatory. You can knock down opponents more easily. Next we have Vitality, which is ripped straight from Vigilance from the fighter vocation, which increases your maximum health by 100. Similar to Endurance from, I believe it was the Thief or the Archer vocation. It's great in the early game and not so much later on, so you'll probably want to switch this out with a later augment. Next we have Impact, which is pretty new. It improves your ability to push and pull targets when grabbing hold, so I'm not sure if this allows you to move faster whenever you're grabbing hold of enemies, or if it will increase your knockback power whenever you jump onto larger enemies, as in having greater momentum and greater weight to push them aside. It's not really all that clear, so we'll have to see how it goes in the final release of Dragon's Dogma 2. And that will conclude the showcase for the Warrior Vocation for Dragon's Dogma 2. Thank you guys for watching. Quick note, I did run a poll last night to decide what vocation to cover this morning. It appears that Thief actually won that, but I actually forgot that I have a recent video that's less than 2 weeks old that you can check out for the Thief vocation, so I will link that into the description, and we will cover that at a later date. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this video covering the Warrior Vocation, and I will see you again real soon.